there's stress, and that's where I thought we could really use that as the springboard into this, is that stress, that cortisol, whether it's you're being chased by a tiger, or you have a stressful job, or you're exercising too much, or you're not eating enough. Those, your body just sees those all as the same stress, and it's going to start shutting things down and reallocating its use of energy. So maybe you can talk about the cascade and domino effect of high cortisol and how it affects your testosterone, your thyroid hormones, even your liver, and then what that looks like manifesting into symptoms.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. And especially because when we are lacking energy, when our, the every cell in our body needs energy to function, we call that ATP. And when we're in a state of deficiency there, and we have a deficit in energy, there are certain hormones that are produced to help make up for that deficit. And cortisol is one of the primary ones there. And while it's really great to have that in the moment to help make up that deficit so we can continue doing whatever we need to do to survive, to function, it acts as a signal in the long term. If we're seeing consistently elevated cortisol more and more, it acts as a signal that we're seeing constant energy deficits. We're in a constant deficiency of energy. And the farther we go down that spectrum, the more cortisol we see, the more we see the downstream effects of cortisol. And again, as you said, our bodies are smart. So cortisol will turn down the production of thyroid hormones. It will, and this is part of why you might have a normal TSH level on a blood test, but if your cortisol is elevated, that TSH could be just suppressed by the cortisol, and it could actually be covering up a hypothyroid state. The cortisol will also reduce the conversion of T4 to T3. So you can have a lot of the inactive T4 hormone. That's the synthroid levothyroxine that almost everybody's given when they're given the hypothyroid diagnosis. And oftentimes there's going to be elevated stress hormones and liver dysfunction in states like that. And so we're going to have poor conversion of that inactive T4 to the active T3. And so your TSH looks normal, but you're not actually feeling any better. You're not actually rid of any of the hypothyroid symptoms. And so that's another effect of the cortisol. Cortisol will also directly reduce the reproductive capacity. And it does this largely via testosterone production. So it'll decrease the hormone called GnRH, yeah, at the hypothalamus. It'll then lead to lower testosterone production, lower reproductive hormone production, lower progesterone production. It also has direct effects at the reproductive organs themselves, at the ovaries, at the testes, and impair or reduce the production of steroid hormones there. So everywhere you look, whether you want to look at the machinery in the cells that's producing energy, you want to look at the function of our liver, you want to look at the function of our immune cells, you want to look at the function of our brain. If you add cortisol in there, it has a general depressing effect in the long term. It slows everything down. And this is well known as well as a side effect of high amounts of cortisol in the form of glucocorticoids that are prescribed as medications. Not only do they cause things like weight gain and swelling and edema, but they also are well known to interfere with the reproductive capacity, to interfere with the reproductive hormones. And so again, to reiterate here, this is an adaptive beneficial response to a poor environment. This is how our bodies properly respond to the poor environment that they might be exposed to. And in the same way that we don't want to just replace the hormones that we've decreased, we don't want to just stop the cortisol per se. We want to stop the need for it. We want to stop the underlying state that's creating a need for the cortisol. And that comes back to the energy deficiency. And that you mentioned a couple of the things that can cause this. This can be everything from chronic infections to a lack of sleep, to a lack of sunlight, to so much of the terrible things in our food supply, the excessively, the crazy amount of polyunsaturated fats, the nutrient deficiencies, the pesticides, and on from there.
And I mentioned in the beginning with my daughter, she had to go on a 0-fat diet for just a couple days. I don't recommend that long term. But that was even the healthy fat. So you can imagine the PUFAs and the damage that that would have done to her and made. And this is the girl that has never had a weight issue in her life. She's the one that says to me, "Mom, I don't have to eat the way you tell me to eat because I can do whatever I want." Well, when it then started affecting her hormones in her liver, she definitely looks at food a little differently.